Welcome everyone to Pathways Through the Orchard. Tonight we'll be discussing Parshat Shemini. We have two insights that we are going to share. And the first one is based upon two phenomena that happen in the portion. And that is, first I should mention that Shemini means the 8th day. The context is the tabernacle, the Mishkan, is being put up in the desert. For 7 days, they put it up and took it down, called it a practice run. And on the 8th day, it was left up, and the service of the Kohanim begins in the Mishkan. This happens on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which is coming very soon in our calendar, a very, very important day. And this is the only parsha in the Torah that's named for a number. So in our Living with the Times this week, we have a whole segment dedicated to understanding the significance of the number 8 and the idea that it's the only parsha that has a number in it. But in this parsha, there's two fairly unusual phenomenon, and that is there are two big letters in this parsha. We know that there are not that many small and big letters in the Torah. Anytime we have them, it means special learning goes along with it. And so for anyone who would like to follow up on their own, I'm in the Tractate of Kiddushin, the Talmudic Tractate of Kiddushin on page 30a. And they point out that first we have it's not two large letters. It's a large letter in this parsha and a large letter in the next parsha. But what we have in this parsha, the two phenomena that I am talking about, is we have the middle of the Torah in words and the middle of the Torah in letters. And for the letters, there's a large letter, a large vav, and it's the word gichon. It's the idea that a snake or a reptile here, it's actually a snake, crawls on its belly. Gichon means belly. And the vav is large in a Sefer Torah. And it's pointed out that this is the middle of the Torah in letters. Earlier in this parsha, what happens is, and this is the subject of one of our Living with the Times, is in the excitement, the enthusiasm, the importance of this day, two sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, take fire from the altar and they put incense on it and they go into the Holy of Holies. And it says that a fire comes out from God and consumes them. Their souls are consumed. And it's explained that it's described as a strange fire that was not commanded. In Orchard of Delights and in Fruits of the Orchard, I delve into the whole story of Nadav and Avihu. Here, I'm not going to do this, but what happens is this is in the middle of the first day of the service in the temple, in the Mishkan. And so what happens is, as you can imagine, everything becomes a bit confused as to what's happening here. And in Moshe's eyes, one of the sacrifices that need to be brought was not brought. And it says that Dorosh Dorash, Moshe sought out intensely what happened to this sacrifice. Dorosh means it's the root of midrash. It means to seek out. Or in Pardes, the series is part of the Orchard series. We know that the Orchard stands for Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. Drush is the same thing as Dorash, Doresh, to seek out. So the very amazing thing is in the middle of these two words, it's a double language, a double seeking out. Right in the middle is the middle point of words in the Torah. So here in the same parsha, we have the middle of words and middle of letters. In next week's parsha, so we're going to have the middle of verses. And all of this is pointed out in the tractate of Kiddushin on page 38. And they explain that, and in the next parsha of the middle point of verses, there's also a big letter showing that this is the middle of verses. So here within two parshas, but very close to each other, we have the middle of letters, the middle of words, and the middle of verses. So I thought that I wanted to build on this idea, this theme, and also connect it to the parsha, the idea of trying to find the midpoint, the middle. So you see that the sages, they actually begin this discussion because it's connected to this idea that this parsha is named for a number. It's very, very connected because numbers are important. So the Gemara points out that, I'm going to read it. It says, Lefikach nikra'u rishonim sofrim. So the early sages were called sofrim. In our language today, a sofer is a scribe, the one who writes the Sefer Torah, or writes mezuzot, or tefillin, or megillot. It's called a sofer. But if we really look at it, there's a question here. Here, the action is writing, yet the name of the person who's writing is called a sofer. Sofer means to count. And so the Gemara begins this little section by saying that the first sages were called sofrim, and the Gemara says, why? Shahayu sofrim kol otiyot shebetorah. They would count all of the letters in the Torah. Now, what this means on a deeper level, and then they go on and they bring these three examples of the middle of letters, the middle of words, the middle of verses. And it's much deeper than they just count letters. The Sofrim had a wisdom based on the mathematical codes engraved in the Torah. Not just how many verses there are, how many letters, how many words, but this is the whole area of gematria, of numerology, of how many words in a Torah portion, how many verses, how many words in a book, how many verses in a book. And there were traditions for all of this. And the sages, who were called Sofrim, found great meaning in this. So I want to take this idea and just explore it a little bit deeper. what is this idea of finding the middle point that the sages thought was very important? In fact, in the Torah itself, two of these phenomenon of letters, words, and verses are marked by large letters, drawing our attention to this. So obviously the sages felt that pointing out the midpoint was an important idea, an important exercise. So here we have an expression called finding the golden mean. And this is especially associated with Rambam, Maimonides. This idea of finding the middle path, the golden path between extremes, between opposites. And we know from many discussions that the way that God made this world was the appearance of duality, of a bipolar world, a world of opposites. That's why the Torah begins with a big bet. Bet is the number 2. That as soon as there is something, as it were, other than God, you already have your first duality. Because before there was creation, there was only one. There was no concept of two, of opposites. It was all one, and it remains one. Nonetheless, the creation, the world, has the appearance of being a dualistic kind of world. And this is the verse that we've mentioned many times. Zeh l'umat zeh asa Elokim. This against this, or this corresponding to this, has God made. And so the idea is, if you have two extremes, we need to find the middle path that will unite them. You see behind me a Magen David. Well, this is the secret of the Magen David, because it's made up of 2 triangles. The triangle going up begins with 2 points, 2 opposites, and then it meets in 1 point. The same with the triangle that's going from above to below. Starts with 2 points and then comes down to 1 point. So this is so symbolic of the reality of the world. In appearance, it appears to be a world of opposites. But in its essence, in its middle point, because this kind of a triangle, where they come together is literally the middle of the lower line, or the upper line of the triangle. So this is the whole idea of finding the middle path, not too extreme on this side or too extreme on that side. And this is obviously one of the greatest tasks in life, is because we're confronted with opposites all the time, and especially in the world of politics, where at least it seems more than ever, that there's very little middle ground anymore. It's really in countries around the world that everything is just, right or left. Just everything is just to moving towards the extremes. And so our advice is to try to find the middle point. And so this is really the secret of the Sfirot as well. That for example, the yin-yang symbol is based on 2 opposites and unified in a circle, and that is very legitimate. But in Kabbalah, we're taught that in the world of Tohu, the Sfirot were not in the 3 columns that we recognize as the Sfirot. They were either in just 1 line or in 2 lines, again, extremes. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the tradition behind the Zohar, revealed that the secret of the middle line is the secret of balance. And it's the secret of what's called tikkun, of rectification. That's why the Arizal called the previous world the world of chaos, the world of tohu, because without the middle column, everything goes to the extremes and cannot handle the light. We need the middle column to synthesize the two extremes. So this is the whole secret of balance. And in fact, one of the most hidden books or sections of the Zohar called Safra Ditzniuta. In English, it's called the Book of Modesty. And it begins by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai explaining that until the world moved towards a consciousness of a middle ground that could bring opposites together, the world was not in a state of rectification. And he was hinting to the idea of the Sfirot having the three columns, the two sides and the middle column. And again, that is the secret of the Magen David, of the picture you see behind you, behind me. So here, this is very connected to what happened with Nadav and Avihu. I'm not going to go into the depths of the whole story, but the action of Nadav and Avihu spontaneously rushing into the Holy of Holies with a offering that was not commanded was the epitome of what's called ratzo, running. And this is part of the term that's called ratzo v'shov, running and returning. The desire or the thrust of the soul to run towards God, to run outside of the body, to run towards oneness and unification with divinity. And shov means returning, being grounded in the body, in this world. And so Nadav and Avihu lacked the balance, the middle golden mean, that when they took that offering into the Holy of Holies, their souls were running with no thought of the return. And the result was, in a certain way, in a deep sense, exactly what they wanted. Their souls were consumed by God. They left their bodies because they didn't have the balance between the running and the returning. And so in a certain way, we can, if we're looking for the most primordial aspect of this idea of finding the golden mean, finding the synthesis between opposites, finding the middle letter, the middle verse, the middle word, is in the very act of creation, where according to the Arizal, this is something that we have discussed many times, is for God, who is infinite, and there is no world, there is no time or space, in order to create a physical, finite world, God, as it were, contracted his infinite being and created an empty space called the Chalal HaPanui, an empty space. And into the empty space, he shone a ray of light, and it's pointed out to the middle of the Chalal HaPanui, to the middle of this empty space. And this is the beginning of creation. This is in a sense, the first act of creation is the shining of this line of light into the empty space, and all the universes come from that original ray of light. This is very similar to the Big Bang. The idea of from a single central point, we have this bang, this explosion, and all of creation goes in every direction. So this is the most primordial aspect of the middle. And so the middle, as I said, it's a very, very important idea. So here, and for those who have 70 faces, for those who have the book 70 Faces, it's chapter 11. A whole chapter is devoted to this idea of the middle of words, verses, and books. So I'm just going to bring a few of them, because here we were dealing in this parsha about the middle words and the middle letters. But this idea of the middle comes up in many, many, many different ways. So I'm just going to go very, very quickly. For those who have 70 faces, you can review later, or you could follow right now. So the first one is on page 106, and that is, and I thought this was very important, the word matzah. 3 weeks from tomorrow night is Pesach, and we'll be eating matzah. And so if we look at the word matzah, so it's pointed out that the middle letter is a tzadi. And here we were talking about the middle letter of the whole Torah, but there's also in words and verses middle letters. And these have great importance. So the middle letter is the tzadi. Tzadi stands for the tzaddik, the righteous one. And within each and every one of us, there is a point of righteousness. And we're told that in Pesach, the essence of matzah is just flour and water, and it's not allowed to rise. The rising represents ego, pride, an egocentric worldview. And so the two outside letters, the mem and the hey of matzah, is the word ma. Ma is the root of the word in Hebrew for essence, mahut. What? Getting to when you ask the question, what? That's why on Seder night, it's all about questions. Because when you ask the question, then you can get to the essence of the answer. So the two outside letters are the mem and the hey, ma. And we know that this represents egolessness, because 2 times when the people challenge Moshe and Aaron, so he says, v'nachnu ma. What are we that you're complaining? You're complaining against God. We're just doing the will of God. There's no ego here. If you want to complain, you have to complain to God, because nachnu ma, what are we? So here you have the word matzah. You have the ma are the 2 outside letters, but by adopting this kind of humbleness, this kind of existential self-nullification, that brings out the tzadi in us. That's the middle letter of matzah. This is actually a very deep teaching of the whole idea of eating matzah during Pesach. So that's an example of just taking a word of 3 letters and understanding the role of the middle letter. Now we'll take the Shema. The Shema has 25 letters. Any word or verse that has an odd number will have a middle letter. When you have even, so then there is a middle, but the question is that on what side? It's not an exact middle. So if you have 25 letters in the Shema, the middle letter is the 13th letter. The 13th letter in the Shema is an Aleph. An Aleph of the word Elokeinu. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu. So the first letter of Elokeinu, our God, is an Aleph. An Aleph, of course, equals 1. And the whole point of the Shema is Hear, O Israel, God our God, God is 1. So the middle letter on which the whole thing balances is the oneness, is the Aleph. And it's also, I'm just going to point out that the word Elokeinu, our God, equals 102, equals the word emunah, faith. And so many times we call the Shema the cardinal statement of faith in Judaism. And so and the word emunah, of course, like Elokeinu, starts with an Aleph. So the Aleph here, the middle letter of the Shema, represents the oneness that we're trying to get to. Another one. I'm just taking like different examples to show the importance of the middle letter. So the word Tiferet. Tiferet is the middle of the Sfirot, between right and left and above and below. The middle Sphira is Tiferet, and it's called the heart. And the heart is like the essence. And so the gematria of Tiferet is 1081. 1081. So the midpoint is 541. And that is the gematria of Yisrael. And so in Echa, God refers to, the book refers to Israel as Tiferet Yisrael, the beauty of Israel. And in Pirkei Avot, there's a verse that we read between each of the chapters of Ethics of the Fathers, between Pirkei Avot. And the verse ends that Israel is the entity that God is glorified in. But the word is et pa'er, that I am made beautiful through Israel. So here, there's a very beautiful idea that the midpoint of beauty of Tiferet is Israel. And as I pointed out in various verses, Israel is compared to Tiferet. It's the very heart. Now, we talked about matzah. So let's talk about another part of the Haggadah. We know that we have the 4 children. The wise one, the not such good one, who's called the Rasha. Usually we translate it as the evil one, but he's not evil. It's not the right translation here. He's just a little bit off the path here. And then you have the simple one and the one who doesn't know how to ask. So, and the Haggadah presents like an answer. Each one of them asks a question, except the fourth one. The fourth one doesn't even know how to say the question. But the other 3 ask a question. And the question that the Rasha asks is considered a bit chutzpahdik. And so it says, therefore you shall blunt his teeth. Other translations is you should hit him in the mouth, meaning you should answer very forcefully, because he's asking a very, it appears to be a cynical kind of a question. And so that's the usual translation. So let's look at the word Russia. So the two outside letters, there's only three letters. The resh and the ayin is evil. But if you switch them around, it's which means to awaken. The middle letter is a shin. Now, where do they get this idea that you shall blunt his teeth, or you should hit him in the mouth? Because the letter shin, one of its meaning is a tooth. A tooth is a shen. And so because obviously the sages understood the depths of Hebrew, they saw a hint here, an allusion to how you should answer the Russia. But what, let me just see 1 second. Okay, I don't see it here right now. But one of the Hasidic rabbis, I don't remember which one, he read it very different. The shin has three prongs. Some say it looks like flames of a fire, but there's also a tradition that the three prongs of a shin stand for the three avot, Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. And so this Hasidic Rebbe said, if someone's asking a question like this, that it seems a little bit lack of respect. So what you have to do is you have to awaken his connection to his tradition. So in other words, it's a very different idea than hitting him in the mouth, blunting his teeth. This Hasidic Rebbe says you have to awaken in this person who's obviously right now lacking a connection to Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. And again, like I said, the word ra, evil, if you turn it around, is to awaken. So he says you have to awaken that part in this person that really is connected to his tradition or her tradition. But they need some help doing it. So again, here is an idea. The shin is the middle letter. So here's a whole drasha based on the outside letters and the middle letter. The last one that I want to do is a very, very interesting one. We could get into very great depths, but I need time for the second insight here, is the letter resh. The letter resh is very unique because it has the aspect of beginning, end, and middle. And this is like the ideal, in a sense, letter, because it's not just at the beginning of the alphabet or the end of the alphabet, or even the middle. It has all three meanings. So how do we see that? So the meaning of the letter resh is rosh, which means head, but also means beginning. Bereshit, in the beginning. Resh, in the beginning. So the letter resh, even though it's coming at the end of the alphabet, its actual meaning as a word implies beginning. Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, the beginning of the year. How do we see it that it's connected to the end? Well, it's the third last letter. It's very close to the end. But what about the middle? Where do we find the middle with the resh? So if we look at we'll call it normative gematria, the 22 letters span from 1 to 400. The last letter, Tav, is 400. The preceding letter, Shin, is 300. And the preceding letter, the Resh, is 200. Well, 200 is the middle of 400. So it has all three meanings: middle, beginning, and end. There's no other letter that has this kind of a phenomena happening about it. So we've gone through just some examples. There are many, many more. For those who have 70 faces, again, go to chapter 11, and you'll see other examples. And of course, these are only the examples that I brought. So here, just to wrap this all up, the middle is, if we get back to matzah, is getting to essence, ma. That is the idea of getting to the middle, because when we're driven to either extreme, that's not the essence. But the middle that can synthesize, that can bring together, can even bring together paradoxes, that is the essence of really of Jewish thought. And that's why the classic statement is wait, well, give me a second. Ze v'gam ze divrei Elokim chaim. This and this are the words of the living God. So here, and we're talking about opposites, two opposite opinions, and the sages say this and this are the words of the living God. That's the idea of solving paradoxes, of seeing how to bring two opposites together and see the truth in both of them. So that was our first insight for tonight, based on the fact that in this parsha we have the middle of letters and the middle of words. Now we're going to go to our second insight. And this is based on, for those who want to look, chapter 11, verse 36. One second. Okay, so one of the very, very important concepts, ideas in Judaism is the idea of the mikvah, the ritual bath, where in old days, at the time of the Torah, when the laws of purity and impurity were very much practiced, because you could not go to the temple in a state of impurity. And there were all kinds of things that made a person ritually impure. We have to state in the beginning that this is not cleanliness and uncleanliness. It's a completely different concept. These are spiritual concepts of pure and impure. And so in the Torah, many, 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 many times, for different situations, the rectification is to go to the mikvah. Though most of the times in the Torah, it does not mention the word mikvah. It just says that you will bathe yourself. But it's implied in what we call a mikvah. So now we're not going to delve into all the laws of mikvah, all the different bodies of water that make a mikvah, what makes a kosher mikvah, just the concept of the idea of becoming pure by going to a mikvah. In our day, the only purity and impurity that remains in a purely halachic way is after a woman menstruates. And in the laws, what are called the laws of family purity, taharat hamishpacha, the laws of family purity, that when husband and wife are together intimately, it cannot be during the time of a woman's menstruation. And then there is call it a period of separating from the blood of menstruation. And then usually around 12 days after the onset of a woman's period, she goes to the mikvah, and husband and wife can renew intimate marital relations. And that is still in practice today, and that is a whole subject in of itself, but it is absolutely one of the bases of a Orthodox lifestyle, is the idea of the mikvah. In Kabbalah and Hasidut, so it became very common and considered a very, very important spiritual practice for men to go to the mikvah also. And that's why some men go before every Shabbos, before every Yom Tov. Some don't go occasionally. But the mikvah is still a very, very important, call it institution in Jewish law and custom. And in fact, the law says that if a community forms and it's a brand new community, there's no synagogue and there's no mikvah. And theoretically, if there's only enough money to build one of them, so which one do you build first? So one might think you build a Beit Knesset first. No, you build the mikvah first, because it's considered that the foundation of the family is based on the laws of family purity. Again, we're not going into why that is, but for those who live it, it's not necessarily an easy lifestyle, but it works wonders in creating a live, passionate, ongoing relationship between husband and wife. We know that in secular society, so many times marriages break up because of affairs. Men and women get tired of each other, take each other for granted, and start looking other places. The laws of family purity, even though from an outsider might seem like going against nature, it actually is just the opposite. It ensures a renewal of intimacy and passion and longing between husband and wife. And it really works. It really, really works. So why am I bringing this up in relationship to Parshat Shemini? And the reason is that the only reference to the mikvah explicitly is in this week's parsha. Even though, as we're going to see, especially in the book of Leviticus, the idea of purifying oneself from all kinds of different states of impurity is only through the mikvah. But there again, it doesn't say explicitly go to the mikvah, using the word mikvah. It says that you shall wash yourself. or you shall bathe. So it's chapter 11, verse 36, and it's only one verse. It's only one verse, but I'm going to hold this up. This is it's a very short book by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. Many people know of this book. It's called The Waters of Eden, The Mystery of the Mikvah. This is a wonderful book to be introduced to the practical laws of mikvah and the mystical spiritual meaning of the mikvah. And so in this short sentence, Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan points out that all of the Jewish laws come out of this one verse. So what is the one verse? It says, Ach mayan ubor mikvah mayim yeh tahor. Uvenogea benivlatam yitma. So it basically just says, nevertheless, a fountain or pit wherein there is a collection of water shall be clean. That's what it says. Again, for those who can, I'm sure it's probably on Amazon. You can get this little book. It's really invaluable. And this is the one actual mention of mikvah in the Torah, in the relationship of what we call the ritual bath, or the place that we dunk in order to become pure. But we see that the first time it's mentioned is right at the beginning of creation. And this is in the 11th verse of Bereshit. No, excuse me, the 10th verse. So this is on the third day of creation, where in the second day of creation, the upper waters is divided from the lower waters and the firmament in between. On the third day, it talks about God gathering the waters to specific places in order to reveal dry land. That's on the third day of creation. And so what does it say? It says, Vayikra Elokim liyabasha eretz ulamikveh hamayim karayamim. So it says, and God called the dry land eretz, ulamikveh hamayim, and the gathering of water. That's literally what mikvah means, a gathering of water. And that's what we can understand for what we call the mikvah, the ritual bath, is a gathering of water. And that, this gathering of water, he called the seas, Yamim. V'yar Elokim ki tov. And God saw that this was good. So this is the first time that the word mikvah appears. But now, and this is very, very connected to the first part of the class. There we're looking for the middle. We'll get to that in a second. But let's look at the word mikvah. And we know that in many, many words, when you have the mem in the beginning, it represents place. That's why in Bereshit, the gathering of the waters into one place, that was called the gathering of the waters. So when you put a mem before a word, it's the place of. So we've been dealing with the Mishkan. So the mem of Mishkan is the place. Shochen means the dwelling of God. Mishkan means the place where God will come and dwell. And it says, V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti bitocha, make for me a holy place. So mikdash, the mem, is the place of Kodesh, of holiness. Mikdash means a place of holiness. That's what we call the temple, the Beit HaMikdash. A hotel is called a malon. Lon comes from the word leina, which means sleep. So malon literally means a place of sleeping. The kitchen is called the mitbach. And tevach literally means slaughtering, because it comes from the language of the Mishkan, but the place that we prepare food. I could go on, there's hundreds of examples. So if we look at the word mikvah, so the mem is the place, but the letters that remain are kuf, vav, hey. And one of the meanings of those three letters is kaveh el Hashem, chazak v'yametz libecha v'kaveh el Hashem. Kaveh means to hope. It means the place of hope. That's one way that we can translate the word mikvah. It's a place of optimism, of positiveness, of hope, of uplifting thought. So we see that when a woman goes to the mikvah, it's like wedding night. This is like very uplifting. And when many men go before Shabbos and Yontif, it's because of the day that's coming is such a positive day. So this is a very, very beautiful idea. So if in the book of Yirmiyahu, 3 different times, and it could be more actually, but 3 different times, he describes God as the hope of Israel. God is described as hope, positiveness. So this is a very, very beautiful idea. For those who want to see in Yirmiyahu, it's in chapter 14, verse 8. And it says, Mikvah Yisrael Moshio, B'yet Sarah. The hope of Israel saves in the time of distress. So that's one. That's in 14:8. Then in 17:13, it says, again, Mikvah Yisrael Hashem. The hope of Israel is God. Mikvah Yisrael Hashem. And then in a third place, in 57. So again, it says, one second. Oh, here, okay. It says, Umikveh avotehem Hashem. The hope of their fathers was God. So here it's not the usual way that we think of the mikvah, but here it's just like sometimes the deepest inner dimensions of the Torah is just looking at the words and seeing what they mean. So here I just want to bring one more, and this was turned into a very, very upbeat song that is sung on Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer is the day that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passes away, but it's also the day that the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying. This is a whole discussion, obviously, in of itself. But based on this Mishnah, this is a Mishnah in Yoma, which is all about Yom Kippur. It's in the 8th chapter of the Mishnah, the 9th Mishnah, or in the Gemara, it's on page 83b. And this is what it says. Rabbi Akiva said, "Happy are you, Israel. Before whom do you purify yourself? Who purifies you? Your Father in heaven. It is thus written in Ezekiel, I will sprinkle pure water upon you, and you shall be clean. And it is written in Jeremiah, one of the verses that we just read. God, Hashem, is Israel's mikvah. He doesn't say it's Israel's hope. He says it's Israel's mikvah. Just as the mikvah purifies the unclean, so God purifies Israel. So Rabbi Akiva actually, in a more almost practical way, not only is God the hope of Israel, but God is the mikvah of Israel. Because God, just like when we go to a mikvah, we are purified. So when we are in a place of total faith in God, so God purifies us. God is our mikvah. So that's just a very, very beautiful idea. But now we have one more point we want to make here. And this is connected to the beginning of the class where we're talking about finding the middle. What's the significance of finding the middle path, the golden mean, the synthesis, the middle letter of a word, the middle letter of a verse, the middle letter of a book? So let's just look at the word mikvah. And we did the words matzah and rasha. So you had a literal middle because you had 3 letters. Here we have 4 letters, mem, kuf, vav, he. But you have 2 outside letters and 2 inside letters. So what are the 2 outside letters? Mem and he. The same teaching that we said about matzah. The idea when Moshe says in great humbleness, V'nachnu ma, what are we? And this is in all Hasidic explanations. This is held out of the epitome of humbleness. Is what am I in relationship to God? But it also means essence. And we put the 2 together that we get to our essence, like in matzah, we get to the tzadi through humbleness, through existential, what's called lowliness. It's a type of lowliness that lifts us up all the way to Hashem. It's not feeling low. It's a sense of ultimate reality of our position vis-a-vis an infinite, all-knowing God. Our little tiny speck of the earth and our little speck of that in relationship to the Creator. So the middle letters is kav. Now that word should sound familiar from the first part of the class, because that is what's called this ray of light that comes into the middle of the empty space. And so why is this so important? Because that is the experience of going to the mikvah. When we go to the mikvah, we go in naked, but it's not just because we take off our clothes. We go in spiritually naked, and we return to the womb. Going into a mikvah is like returning to the womb, and it's a place of deep essence where we experience our own essence, we experience our essence in relationship to God. And this is where the hope comes from. That's what I said before. It sounds paradoxical, but existential lowliness raises us up to the highest level. And to go into a mikvah, you have to go down. you go down into the mikvah. You have to be submerged in the water. But that going down brings us up to the highest levels of hope and connects us to this kav, to the initial ray of light. So this is a very, very deep idea, but I want to end, I don't remember which Rebbe it was, that he went with his Hasidim to a mikvah, and for some reason, I don't know, there was no water in the mikvah. There was no water in the mikvah. It wasn't an operational mikvah. And it was right before Shabbos. And he said to his Hasidim, just come around me. And he like dunked between his Hasidim. So well, it sounds kind of funny, but there's a deep idea here. In other words, there is a level that you can go to a mikvah without going to a physical mikvah. Obviously, going to a physical mikvah, it has all the props of a deep experience. But it's like, what I'm thinking of is the Hanukkah lights. So I wrote a whole book, 100 meditations on the lights of Hanukkah. But one of the things I point out is it doesn't have to be Hanukkah in a sense, to do many of these meditations. Any candle will do. And even without a candle, one can do it mentally. That's the whole idea of visualization, of meditation, of rectified imagination. So here we're learning about mikvah, but the teachings can be experienced through meditation, through visualization. One can visualize themselves going into the mikvah, going back to the womb, going into this place of hope, going into this place, like Rabbi Akiva says, where God is the mikvah of Israel. So being in a state of pure faith is like going into a mikvah. Is like going into a mikvah. I remember Reb Shlomo used to say, going into a house where there's a new baby is like going to a mikvah. I remember he used to say that. There's something like, we all know this. You look at a baby and you melt in their purity. And he used to say, going into a house with a little baby is like going into a mikvah. So I just want to end with a blessing that we could take these teachings from tonight about finding our own middle path, our own golden mean between the extremes in our own lives. Every person is made up of many, many, many different pulls and forces and influences. And we're constantly trying to find the middle path. And so here we see that this whole idea is also in the idea of the mikvah, the kav in the midst of the essence. And we all have the rectified imagination to go to that place.